The morning sun was soft on the open plains, warming the long grass that waved in the slow wind. Birds hopped between the fence posts. The air carried the smell of dust and horses. Clara, a young ranch girl with steady hands and a worried heart, stepped out toward the trail that cut across her family's land. Her boots crunched the dry dirt as she scanned the distant hills, searching for one person she never thought she would dare approach. She saw him before he saw her, a tall Comanche warrior riding a paint horse, his posture calm and straight, his presence powerful even from far away. His name was Tehane, a man known across the plains for his sharp eyes and fierce spirit. To most ranchers, he was someone to keep distance from, someone mysterious, someone they didn't understand. But to Clara, he was her last hope, and she felt that truth heavy in her chest when Tehane slowed his horse near her. He looked down with measured curiosity. It was unusual for any ranch girl to block his path, let alone one who looked as nervous as Clara did. But she forced her courage to stay steady and lifted her chin. "You need to come with me," she said, her voice shaking only a little. For a moment there was nothing but silence and the soft rustle of grass. Then Tehane let out a quiet chuckle, deep and warm, a sound that surprised Clara more than anything else. It was not cruel, not mocking, but amused, as if he wondered whether she knew what she was asking. His lips pulled into a faint smile, and he tilted his head like someone trying to decide if this girl was bold or simply reckless. Clara felt her cheeks heat, but she kept her posture firm, though he'd rehearsed her words in her room, repeating them until her voice didn't shake. But hearing him laugh made her feel small, though she refused to step back. Tehane's chuckle faded, and his expression grew serious again. "What makes a ranch girl stop a warrior in open land?" he asked quietly. Clara swallowed hard and spoke the truth. "My father is missing," she said, "and I think someone took him." Tehane's gaze sharpened, and he shifted slightly in the saddle. No longer amused, Clara explained everything quickly, her hands twisting as she talked. Her father had left at dawn to check the far cattle pens but never returned. She found strange tracks near the fence line, tracks she had never seen before. And the neighbor who came to help insisted it was cattle thieves. But Clara knew it was something more, something heavier, something dangerous. Tehane listened with the stillness of someone who understood the land better than most people understood themselves. He glanced toward the direction she had described, his eyes narrowing, as if remembering something he had seen earlier that morning. Clara continued, her voice soft but steady. "You're the only one who might know what those tracks mean," she said, "and the only one brave enough to follow them." Tehane blinked once, surprised by her honesty. Most people avoided him, watching him from a distance, with stiff shoulders and whispers. But this girl stood before him, without fear of him, only fear of losing her father. It made her bold in a way he had not expected. He swung down from his horse in one smooth motion, the sound of his boots soft against the dirt. Now standing beside her, he seemed even taller, but Clara didn't feel intimidated. He crouched and touched the ground, brushing his fingers over the dust where hoof prints and footprints mixed. His face shifted, not to fear, but recognition. "These tracks do not belong to cattle thieves," he murmured. Clara felt a cold tremor run through her. "Then who took my father?" she whispered. Tehane stood slowly, the morning wind brushing through the feathers tied in his hair, his eyes locked onto hers. "Steady and serious, we will follow them," he said, "and you will see." Clara breathed out shakily, unsure whether she was ready for whatever truth waited ahead. But she nodded because she knew there was no other choice left. Tehane stepped toward his horse, but instead of mounting, he extended his hand to her. "You ride with me," he said. "The trail is long, and you cannot walk it alone." Clara stared at his hand for several moments. A few minutes ago, he had chuckled at her request, but now he was offering protection and guidance, something she didn't expect from someone the townspeople feared so much. She placed her hand in his, feeling his strength steady her shaking fingers. He helped her onto the horse before swinging up behind her with calm confidence. The landscape stretched wide and open before them, glowing under the rising sun. As the horse began to move, Clara realized one thing with sudden clarity: this journey would change everything. And the Comanche warrior who had laughed at her boldness was now the only man she could trust to bring her father back alive. The horse moved in a steady rhythm across the plains. Its hooves thudding softly against the dry earth, Clara sat in front of Tehane, trying to keep her breathing calm, even as her heart raced with worry. The wind brushed her hair back while she held the saddle tight. Grateful for the warrior's steady presence behind her, Tehane guided the horse with gentle but confident movements, his eyes scanning the land as if the earth itself whispered secrets to him. They reached the fence line where Clara had first noticed the strange tracks. Tehane brought the horse to a stop and stepped down with quiet precision. Clara followed, her boots landing softly as she tried to see the ground the way he did. Tehane crouched low, his fingers tracing the marks in the dust with slow, thoughtful strokes. Clara watched him silently, her breath caught in her chest as she waited for him to speak. "These tracks belong to 3 men," he said, his voice calm but firm. Clara blinked in surprise. "How can you tell?" she asked, kneeling beside him. Tehane pointed to the pattern in the dirt, showing her the shape of each footprint, the depth of each step, and the spacing that revealed the men's height and weight. "They were moving quickly," he continued, "but not running." He tapped one footprint lightly, and this one. He carries something heavy on his right side. Clara felt her stomach twist. "He's carrying my father," she whispered. Tehane didn't answer right away, but the tightening of his jaw told her enough. Her fear deepened, but she forced herself to stay focused. "What kind of men took him?" she asked softly. Tehane stood, his gaze sweeping the horizon. "Not thieves," he said, "not drifters."
Yes.
His voice held a weight she didn't understand yet. "These men know the land too well." Clara shivered despite the warm sun. She had hoped for a simple explanation, even a frightening one, but this was worse, because Tehane's tone carried a history she knew nothing about. He walked to his horse and pulled down a small leather pouch. Inside were herbs, dried roots, and a thin piece of carved bone. Clara tilted her head. "Confused? What is all that for?" she asked. Tehane met her gaze with quiet seriousness. "To keep us safe," he said. "The men we are following are part of something old." Clara didn't know what that meant, but the way he spoke made her skin prickle. Tehane motioned for her to walk beside him, and together they followed the long trail that stretched far beyond the ranch land. The tracks turned toward the thicker brush, where trees grew closer and shadows clung to the ground even at midday. Clara stepped carefully, listening to every rustle of leaves, every distant bird call. Tehane walked ahead with steady confidence, pausing now and then to examine the ground or smell the breeze like a hunter searching for invisible signs. After a while, Clara asked the question that had been pressing against her chest. "Why would they take my father?" she said. Tehane didn't answer immediately. He bent to touch the dirt again, then straightened slowly. "There are men who believe the land belongs to no one but themselves," he said, "men who do not like ranchers building fences and claiming water." Clara's heart tightened. "My father never hurt anyone," she said, her voice shaking. "He only worked our land and kept to himself." Tehane nodded slightly. "I believe you," he said. "But some men only see walls and lines where there used to be open paths." He paused and looked at her carefully. "Your father may have seen something he was not meant to see."
Oh.
Clara felt a cold wave move through her. "What do you mean?" she asked. Tehane stepped closer, lowering his voice. "There have been tensions between certain Comanche bands and ranchers," he said, "but these tracks do not belong to Comanche." Clara stared at him in confusion. "Then who?" she whispered. Tehane's jaw tightened. "Men who pretend to be something they are not," he said, "men who want trouble." They continued deeper into the brush, the silence around them growing heavier. The air felt thicker, as if the forest held its breath with them. Clara stumbled once, and Tehane reached out quickly to steady her. His grip was firm but gentle, and she felt a strange comfort in it. "You are strong," he said quietly, "stronger than you think." Clara looked down, unsure how to answer. His voice held sincerity she didn't expect. As they walked, the tracks began to change. The footprints grew more spaced. As if the men were getting tired or carrying extra weight, Tehane followed them with renewed focus. But there was something new in his eyes, a flicker of concern he hadn't shown before. Clara noticed it and felt her chest tighten. "What is it?" she asked. He shook his head slowly. "They are stopping often," he said. "That means they are preparing for something." Clara swallowed. "For what?" Tehane placed a hand on her shoulder, steadying her trembling breath. "For us," he said quietly. "They know someone will follow." Clara felt her heart pound faster, but she didn't turn back, and she didn't let fear stop her feet. She knew one truth now. Whatever danger waited ahead, she would face it beside the warrior who had chosen to help her. And Tehane, with his sharp instincts and calm strength, knew something else as well. The trail they were following was no longer only about finding her father. It was about uncovering a threat far bigger than either of them had expected. The deeper Clara and Tehane walked into the trees, the quieter the world seemed to become. The wind softened, the birds stopped calling, and even their footsteps felt muffled under the thick layer of dry leaves. Clara stayed close to Tehane, her nerves tightening with every step. She could feel danger growing around them like a shadow that didn't belong to the forest. Tehane paused near a broken branch and crouched low again. Clara watched him study the ground, as if every small detail carried a message. "There were horses here," he said, touching a patch of disturbed soil. "And they did not tie them for long." His voice stayed low, but steady. Clara looked around, trying to imagine the men moving through these woods. "Are they still close?" she asked. Tehane nodded slowly. "Close enough to hear us, if we are not careful." Clara felt her heartbeat thudding in her throat. She lowered her voice to a whisper. "What do we do now?" Tehane stood and motioned for her to follow him deeper into the forest. "We move with silence," he said, "and we use the land to hide us." He stepped lightly between the trees. Every movement controlled and graceful. Clara followed his steps carefully, copying the way he avoided dry sticks and loose rocks. It was strange to her that danger could make someone more focused, more alert than fear allowed, and yet she felt safer because he was there. They walked until the trees opened into a small clearing. Tehane raised his hand quickly, signaling her to stop. Clara froze, her breath catching in her chest through the brush ahead. She saw smoke rising in thin gray strands. It drifted from a spot hidden behind tall bushes and fallen logs. A camp Tehane crouched low and motioned for her to do the same. His eyes narrowed as he studied the scene. Clara leaned closer, trying to see what he saw. Two men were sitting near a small fire, their faces rough and tired. A third man paced back and forth, kicking at the dirt every few steps. Clara stared hard, hoping to see her father, but he wasn't there. Her heart sank. "They're not with him," she whispered. Tehane touched her shoulder lightly. "They left someone behind to guard him," he said. "These three are here to hide their trail." Clara felt confusion wash over her. "Why hide their trail?" she asked. Tehane's expression tightened. "Because they know someone is tracking them." Clara's stomach twisted. U.S. Tehane nodded once. "They expect a rancher or a sheriff. Not someone who sees the land the way I do." One of the men at the camp suddenly stood and stretched. Clara ducked down quickly, her heart pounding hard. Tehane stayed perfectly calm, watching every movement with trained patience. "They are restless," he said quietly, "and restless men make mistakes." Clara felt the faintest spark of hope. "What kind of mistakes?" she asked. Tehane motioned toward the man pacing. "He leaves tracks a child could follow," he said. "And the one sitting there is afraid." Clara looked again and noticed how the man rubbed his hands together over and over. She hadn't seen it before, but now it was clear. Tehane shifted his attention toward the direction the men had likely taken. "We need to find where they went with your father," he said. "But first we must deal with these three." Clara's breath caught. "Deal with them how?" she whispered. Tehane reached for the small bone charm he carried earlier. He tied it around his wrist and looked at her calmly. "We don't fight unless we must," he said. "We watch, we wait. And we move when the land gives us a chance." They stayed hidden in the bushes. Watching the men, Clara tried to stay calm, but the longer she stared at them, the more her fear grew. Her father was somewhere out there, maybe hurt, maybe tied up. Every second felt heavier than the last. Tehane noticed her shaking hands and leaned closer. "You will not face this alone," he said softly. His voice carried a strange comfort. Steady and warm, Clara swallowed hard and nodded. Minutes passed slowly, stretching like hours finally. One of the men grabbed a canteen and walked away from the camp to fetch water. Tohane's eyes sharpened. "There," he whispered. Clara followed his gaze and understood. With one man gone, the others were weaker. More distracted, more vulnerable. Tohane touched Clara's arm gently. "When I move, you stay behind me," he said. "Do not step where I don't step," Clara nodded. Her breath shallow but steady. She trusted him completely now. More than she trusted herself, Tohane moved with quiet precision, slipping from the brush like a shadow. Clara followed, copying his steps exactly. They moved closer to the camp, inch by inch. Clara could hear her heartbeat in her ears. One wrong step could give them away. One snapped twig could end everything. Tohane reached the edge of the clearing and held up his hand. Clara froze, holding her breath. The two men by the fire were arguing now, their voices growing louder, distracting themselves from the forest around them. Tohane leaned close to Clara and whispered for quiet words. "Now the land helps us." Tohane kept Clara close as they crouched behind the thick brush at the edge of the clearing. The arguing voices of the two men by the fire grew louder, rising and falling like angry wind. Clara watched them with a mix of fear and growing determination. She didn't know what waited ahead, but she knew one thing clearly now: these men had taken her father, and she would not leave without him. Tohane studied the scene with the steady patience of a hunter. "These men are careless," he whispered. "Careless men reveal more than they mean to." Clara listened closely, trying to focus on his calm instead of her fear. One of the men threw a stick into the fire and cursed loudly. "We should have gone farther by now," he growled. "They said meet at the old canyon." Clara stiffened. Old Canyon, she knew that place. A hidden cut in the land miles away, a place people rarely visited. If the men planned to meet someone there, then her father must be on the way to that location already. Tohane glanced at Clara and saw the fear in her eyes sharpen into understanding. "You know the canyon?" he said quietly. Clara nodded. "It's deep," she whispered, "and hard to climb out of." Tohane's jaw tightened. "That is why they chose it," he said. A place where a man can disappear? The idea sent a cold wave rushing through Clara's whole body. She gripped the grass beneath her fingers, trying to steady herself. Tohane placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "We will reach him," he said. "But these men will warn the others if they escape." Clara understood what he meant. Stopping them was not about violence. It was about time. Time her father might not have. The sound of footsteps returned through the trees. The man who went for water walked back toward the camp. Carrying a full canteen, Tohane's posture sharpened instantly. "The moment is gone," he whispered. "We wait again." Clara felt frustration burn inside her chest. Waiting felt unbearable, but she reminded herself that Tohane saw things she couldn't. He knew the land and danger better than anyone she had ever met. She trusted him, even when fear tried to push her forward recklessly. The men settled again around the fire, now quieter, more cautious. The one with the canteen leaned back against a log and sighed. "You think the boss will actually pay us?" he muttered. The pacing man snorted. "He better," he said. "Or we'll take the rancher to someone who will." Clara's breath hitched painfully. Tohane's eyes narrowed. "These men are hired," he murmured. "Not acting on their own." Clara pressed a hand against her mouth. "Who would hire them?" she whispered. Tohane shook his head. "Someone with money," he said. "Someone who wants something your father knows or something he has." Clara tried to think. Her father owned nothing valuable enough for a kidnapping. They had cattle, land, tools, normal ranch supplies. Nothing that would push men to violence. Unless a memory struck her, sharp and sudden, 3 days ago. Her father had found something while digging a new water trench. Clara remembered him coming home dirty. Tired and strangely distracted, he had brushed off her questions, saying it was nothing, but she knew him well. He had been hiding something he thought might cause trouble. Clara whispered the memory to Tohane. He listened carefully, his expression growing more serious with every detail. "If he found something in the ground," Tohane said, "then others may have found out. What could it be?" Clara asked. Tehane shook his head slowly. Whatever it is. It was worth taking him. The men by the fire began packing their things. Clara tensed. They're moving, she whispered. Tehane nodded once. They will head to the canyon, he said. If we follow now, we risk being seen. Clara frowned. But if we wait, we lose time. Tehane looked at her with steady eyes. We follow them from far behind, he said. They will lead us to your father. But we must not let them know we are close. The men finally left the camp, disappearing into the trees with their gears slung over their shoulders. Tehane waited until their footsteps faded into the distance. Then he rose, pulling Clara gently to her feet. We move quickly, he said, but quietly. They walked along the side of the trail. Careful not to step directly in the men's tracks, Clara stayed close, her nerves steadying with each step behind them. The smoke from the abandoned camp dispersed quietly through the trees. Ahead of them, the trail stretched toward the old canyon. Toward her father, toward answers they were not ready for, and toward a truth that would shake everything Clara thought she knew about the men behind this plan. Tehane glanced at the narrowing path and spoke softly. Stay close, Clara, he said. The canyon holds more secrets than the forest. And as they stepped deeper into the thick shadows of the woods, Clara felt the land grow heavier around them, like even the earth knew something dangerous waited ahead. The path to the old canyon narrowed as Clara and Tehane moved deeper into the woods. The trees grew taller and closer together, blocking much of the sunlight until everything around them felt dim and waiting. Clara could hear her own heartbeat more than the wind. Every step forward felt like stepping into a place the land wanted to keep secret. Tehane stayed ahead of her, his movements silent and smooth. He stopped often to study the ground, the trees, even the smell of the air. Clara watched him with growing respect. His calm in the middle of danger steadied her more than any words could. The men picked up speed, he said quietly as he checked the trail again. They want to reach the canyon before sunset. Clara frowned. Why before sunset? Tehane straightened slowly, his eyes following the distant slope of land. Because shadows hide what men do not want others to see, he replied. And inside the canyon, shadows grow fast. Clara swallowed hard. The canyon had always unsettled her. It was deep, narrow, and shaped like a natural trap. Voices bounced strangely off the walls, twisting sound into something eerie and unfamiliar. Children in the town joked that the canyon kept secrets from the living. But today it wasn't a joke anymore as they walked. The trees slowly thinned, and the ground sloped downward. Soon the land opened up to the canyon entrance. A wide crack in the earth that led into a steep, rugged descent. Clara stared at it, remembering all the times her father had warned her never to climb near it alone. Now he was somewhere inside, or worse, somewhere beyond it. Tehane crouched behind a large rock and motioned for Clara to do the same. She lowered herself quietly, her eyes scanning the open ground ahead. The men they had followed were nowhere in sight. But footprints in the dust showed they had passed through recently. Tehane touched the prints lightly. They carried him this far, he said, but here. Someone else joined them. Clara leaned closer. Someone else. Tehane pointed to footprints that were larger, heavier, and pressed deep into the soil. These belong to a fourth man, he said, and he is strong. Clara felt her hope twist painfully. How many people want my father? She whispered. Tehane didn't answer that question. Instead, he stood and looked down into the canyon. Your father is alive, he said simply. I can see the signs. Clara blinked fast, her breath catching. You're sure? Tehane nodded. Alive but tired, he said. They let him rest at some point. Clara closed her eyes and took a long breath. For the first time since morning, relief filled her chest like warm sunlight, even if danger waited ahead. Knowing her father lived gave her strength she didn't know she had left. Tehane placed a hand on her shoulder before stepping toward the canyon path. This is where we move slowly, he said. The canyon has eyes. What does that mean? Clara whispered. Tehane pointed at the cliff edges. Sound travels differently here, he said. And those who want to stay hidden, use that to their advantage. They descended carefully, each step placing them deeper into the canyon, where the air felt cooler and heavier. The walls rose high on either side. Covered in shadows, even though the sky above was clear, Clara walked close to Tehane, listening to the muffled echoes of their footsteps that seemed to chase them. Something about this place felt ancient, not dangerous because of the men, but dangerous because the canyon itself felt alive with secrets. Midway down, Tehane stopped suddenly. He raised his hand for silence. Clara froze instantly. Her breath trapped in her chest. A faint sound drifted through the canyon. A voice, low and tired. Clara's eyes widened. "That's my father," she whispered. Tehane nodded, listening carefully. "He is close," he murmured. But not alone. They moved toward the sound. Taking the narrow path that curved along the canyon wall, Clara walked with quiet desperation. Her father's voice rose again. This time clearer. He sounded exhausted, but he was speaking to someone. Someone who answered with a voice filled with confidence and command. Clara didn't recognize the tone. Tehane, however, stiffened immediately. He pressed his hand against the canyon wall and whispered. That voice, Clara looked at him. Confused? "Do you know him?" she asked. Tehane's expression darkened. "He is the man I hoped we would not find." They moved closer. Staying hidden behind a cluster of boulders? The voices echoed from a flat ledge inside the canyon where the men had stopped. Clara peeked over the rocks and saw her father sitting on the ground. His hands tied, but his face determined. 3 of the kidnappers stood nearby, and a 4th, man broad-shouldered tall, wearing a dark coat, stood facing him. Clara felt anger burn inside her chest. Tehane leaned close and whispered, "That man once tried to claim land that was not his," he said quietly. "He was exiled for betraying both Comanche and settlers." Clara stared at the tall man. "What does he want with my father?" Tehane's voice dropped to a grim whisper. "He wants whatever your father found." And as they watched from the shadows, the truth finally began to unfold, but with every passing second. The danger around them grew sharper, because the man leading the kidnappers turned slightly, as if sensing that hidden eyes were watching him from the canyon walls. Tehane kept Clara low, behind the cluster of boulders. His hand rested lightly on her arm, steadying her as she tried to breathe past the tight fear in her chest. Below them, on the canyon ledge, her father sat tied and exhausted, but alive. That alone gave her strength, even as danger pressed close around them like tightening walls. The tall man in the dark coat stepped closer to her father. His boots scraped the stone, echoing against the canyon walls in long, stretched-out sounds. He crouched slightly and held up a small cloth bundle. Clara squinted, trying to see what it was. Her father's shoulders stiffened, and his jaw clenched in a way she recognized. He only looked like that when he refused to surrender something important. "Tell me where the rest is," the tall man demanded. His voice carried a smooth confidence that made Clara's skin crawl. Her father spat dust from his mouth and answered with a firm voice, "I told you. I don't have anything else." The man sighed as if disappointed. "Ranchers," he muttered, "always pretending they know nothing." Clara's hands curled into fists. Whatever her father found in the ground clearly meant more than she imagined. She whispered to Tehane, "What did he find?" Tehane shook his head slightly. "I do not know," he said, "but that man believes it is worth blood." Clara looked again at the tall stranger and saw something else. Something that unsettled her even more. He carried himself like someone used to power, not a simple outlaw. Not a rancher's enemy, something darker. Something with influence. The canyon wind brushed gravel against the stone. The tall man stood and signaled one of his hired men. A thick-set man with scars on his arms walked over and grabbed Clara's father by the collar. Clara gasped quietly, but Tehane tightened his grip on her wrist before she could move. "Do not reveal yourself," he whispered. "Not yet." Clara felt anger burn behind her ribs. "How can I stay still while they hurt him?" she whispered. Tehane leaned closer, his breath steady. "Because rushing now will cost his life," he said. "And yours?" His words hit her hard. But she forced herself to stay still. Her father needed saving. Not reckless bravery. Tehane was right. She needed him to guide her through this, down below. The tall man waved for the scarred man to release her father. Clara's tension eased for a second until she saw why. The tall man pulled the cloth bundle open. Inside was a strange, stone-smooth dark. With patterns that didn't look natural, even from a distance Clara could see it shimmer faintly in the canyon light. Her father exhaled sharply. "That's all there was," he said. "There's nothing special about it," but the tall man smiled. "Oh, there is," he replied. "And you know it," Clara whispered. "What is that?" Tehane narrowed his eyes. "It is an old thing," he murmured. "A marker, maybe." Clara frowned. A marker for what? Tehane didn't answer. His silence said enough. Whatever it was, it mattered, and it mattered deeply. The tall man turned to his men. "Once we reach the center," he said, "we will find the other half." Clara stared at him in disbelief. "Other half," she whispered. Her father had found something broken. Something that matched another piece hidden somewhere in the canyon. Tehane whispered quietly, "They intend to search deeper." Suddenly, a small rock slipped under Clara's foot and skidded down the canyon wall. She froze, her heart slamming painfully against her ribs. The sound echoed faintly, but enough for the scarred man to snap his head up. "What was that?" he barked. Tehane reacted instantly, pulling Clara behind the rock farther. He pressed a finger to his lips. She held her breath. Her pulse thundered in her ears. The tall man raised a hand. "Quiet," he ordered. He listened. Scanning the canyon walls with sharp eyes, Tehane didn't move a muscle. The wind passed through the canyon again, brushing dust across the ledge after a long moment. The tall man finally stepped back. "Probably a falling stone," he muttered. "Canyon's full of them." Clara released a shaky breath. Tehane looked at her. "Be careful," he whispered. "The canyon hears everything below." The men prepared ropes and packs. The tall man spoke again. "Move the rancher," he said, "if he refuses to help. He'll be useful in other ways." Clara didn't understand the words at first. Then dread struck her so sharply she leaned forward instinctively. "Useful," she whispered. Tehane answered in a low, tense voice. "They plan to use him as leverage." Clara's breath trembled. "I can't let them take him deeper." Tehane turned to her. His voice steady. "We stop them," he said. "But not with anger. With planning." Clara nodded slowly. She didn't feel brave, but she felt determined. Her father needed her, and she had Tehane. A man who read danger like others read words. Tehane watched the kidnappers begin to move toward a narrow passage on the left side of the canyon. "This is our moment," he said. "We follow them. But we choose a path they will not watch." Clara tightened her grip on the rock beside her. Her father's life depended on every step she took next, and with a deep breath, she followed Tehane into the narrowing shadows of the canyon, where rescue and danger waited side by side. Clara followed Tehane along the narrow ridge that curved above the kidnapper's path. The canyon walls rose high on both sides, cutting the wind and trapping sounds so they echoed softly around them. Clara's breath came in slow. Careful pulls as she tried to match Tehane's silent steps below them. The kidnappers led her tired father through a twisting passage toward the deeper part of the canyon. The men stayed close around him like wolves guarding stolen prey. Tehane stopped suddenly and pointed at a thin trail carved naturally along the canyon wall. "This path leads ahead of them," he whispered. "We can reach the next opening before they do." Clara nodded, tightening her grip on the rock as she followed him up the narrow climb. Her boots scraped lightly, but she kept her steps as soft as she could. Every sound felt like a danger that could give them away. But she trusted Tehane's judgment more than her own fear. When they reached the higher ledge, the canyon opened into a wider space, a place where sunlight stretched across the stone floor like a waiting spotlight. Tehane knelt behind a large boulder and motioned for Clara to stay down. "We will confront them here," he said quietly. "Not with force." Clara looked at him with confusion. "Then how?" she whispered. Tehane pulled a small leather pouch from his belt and placed it on the ground. Inside were small stones, herbs, and a feather. Clara frowned. "What will that do?" she asked. Tehane gave a faint smile. "Sometimes the mind can be shaken without a blade." He arranged the items in a small circle. His fingers moved with slow, practiced care. The wind shifted suddenly, sweeping through the canyon with a low hum. Clara watched him, unsure what he was doing. But she felt a strange calm settle around them, as if the canyon itself listened. Tehane whispered something in Comanche under his breath, his voice low, steady, and filled with purpose. Below them, footsteps echoed. The kidnappers were approaching the wide space. Clara's heart hammered against her chest. She crawled forward slightly and peeked over the rock. Her father stumbled as the scarred man pulled him forward. The tall man in the dark coat walked with long, confident strides, his expression sharp. Scanning the path ahead, Tehane leaned close to Clara. When they step into the open, he whispered, "Stay hidden until I call you." Clara nodded, her fingers trembling as she pressed them into the dirt. Everything inside her wanted to run to her father now. But she listened to Tehane. She knew his plan was the only chance they had. The first kidnapper entered the open clearing, then the second, then the scarred man. Still dragging Clara's father, finally, the tall man stepped in. His boot scraped the stone floor with a sharp echo. That was the moment Tehane moved. He rose from behind the boulder with calm authority. His presence filled the space like shifting wind. "Enough," he said, his voice powerful and steady. The sound bounced through the canyon, making the men freeze instantly. The tall man spun around, eyes narrowing. "Well," he said slowly, "I wondered when you'd show yourself." Clara's breath caught. They knew each other. This was no random encounter. Tehane stepped forward, not a hint of fear in his stance. "You stole a man who harmed no one," he said. "You walk where you are not welcome," the tall man smirked. "You of all people should understand," he replied. "Some things belong to the land, and I intend to claim what was left behind." Tehane shook his head. "You claim only what your greed tells you to claim." Clara felt her father lift his head weakly. His eyes widened when he saw Tehane. "Tehane," he whispered hoarsely. But the scarred man yanked him roughly. Clara's body tensed instantly. She wanted to leap out. Her whole being burned with the need to protect him. But she held herself still, waiting for Tehane's signal. Tehane raised his hand slowly. The wind shifted again, carrying dust across the stone. "What you seek was not meant for you," he said to the tall man. "It is not a treasure. It is a warning." The tall man laughed. "A warning that will lead me to power?" Clara frowned in confusion. Tehane placed a foot forward and spoke in a steady tone. "You misunderstood its meaning. It was meant to keep people away, not draw them in." The tall man's smile faded slightly. Uncertainty flickered in his eyes. Tehane's voice grew stronger, rebounding off the canyon walls. "You lead your men into danger, and you do not even realize the canyon shifts at sunset." The men exchanged uneasy glances. Clara watched as doubt spread through them like wildfire. The scarred man loosened his grip on her father. "What is he talking about?" he snapped. The tall man clenched his jaw. "He's trying to scare you." Tehane stepped closer. "If I wanted to scare you," he said calmly, "you would already be running." Silence fell over the canyon for a long moment. Then Tehane looked toward the boulder and spoke clearly. "Clara, come." The men turned in shock as Clara rose from hiding. Her father gasped her name. The kidnappers shifted nervously. For the first time since the chase began, Clara felt fear take a step back. She walked forward with trembling courage, her voice steady despite her shaking hands. "You won't take him any farther," she said. The canyon held its breath as the final confrontation approached, and the men realized they were no longer in control.